I'm Rick Leczel. I'm a feature writer at mixdown.com, and I have a pleasure today of speaking with Adam Franklin, the kind of the one of the founders of Swervedriver's. Been around the block a few years, and
Well, we have.
kind of I don't know if this is a welcome back or a never left or look at me now type of thing.
I think it's another sort of semi-welcome back. I mean, it's been
Uh-huh.
a while since we put anything out. I
Yeah.
think the original period when we kind of broke up and then reappeared was, I think, 7 or 8 years.
Hmm.
I guess it's been six since we toured at least, well, put an album out as well. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
so yeah, so it's kind of like hey, we're kind of back in a way, kind of thing.
Well, that's great. So I have a list, but I have a feeling that watching some of your past interviews, and I was watching some today, so I'm going to mix it up a little bit from the original order I put it in. Um, I wanted to start obviously with the World's Fair. I'm full transparency. I'm a new Swervedriver fan. Probably
Okay,
never heard. I heard of you, or I probably heard your stuff. Especially was
right,
surprised to find out PlayStation had some of your music in it. So,
yeah,
but it's right up my alley. And so this new album, it has new fans like me, it has veteran fans, some of your stalwarts, and then it also has a lot of industry fans that like it and are critically reviewing it positively, praising tracks like Time Attacks and Pack Your Vision as a return to form. And I saw that because I was listening to the World's Fair song with Duel kind of playing side by side and switching and
right,
going back and forth. And wow,
yeah.
I just see a line straight through, or I hear a line straight through.
Hmm.
So I've heard it said that that this album or this EP was like that an entry level vehicle for the new fan of Swervedriver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it could be. Yeah, I mean, it's an EP, and that's how we first put out our releases. Is like, there were three EPs before the first album,
Hmm.
a couple more before the second album, just because that seemed to be what was going on at the time in bands in London or whatever,
I
or in
remember
the
those
UK.
days.
And so we kind of thought, well, we've got these four songs, and rather than breaking our backs to try and write a whole album, let's just put them out, really. And I
Hmm.
mean, I kind of feel that my consumption of music has generally always been sort of song by song anyway. I mean, when I first got into music, really, it was like 7-inch singles in the early 70s, glam rock singles and stuff, T-Rex or
Hmm.
whatever,
Hmm.
and then great B-sides as well. And even today, I'll hear a song by a band I really like, and I'll go, "Oh, that's great," and then check out the album. But then I won't always go back to the album. I'll maybe put it into shall we say, a playlist,
Hmm.
like an old mixtape.
I love
So,
mixtapes.
but I'm always quite happy to see that people purchasing because we sell the music on Bandcamp, and sometimes, and you get these alerts saying somebody's bought such and such a record or whatever, or an EP, but then you get somebody sometimes just buying one or two or three individual songs, and I always quite like that, kind of obscure little B-sides or whatever,
Yeah.
but
Sell it
I think,
wherever it goes, right?
yeah, and it's like, it's a fair trade, $1 or £1 for a song, can you say fairer than that? It's cheaper than a cup of coffee.
I like that. So, well, speaking of that, Bandcamp, I have a question about Do Re Mi and kind of
Yeah.
the concept behind B-sides demos. Was that a way, A, was dropping it just planned spontaneity, and B, was this a way to kind of, was it a time capsule project, the Do Re Mi? Was it you going back to your younger self to, was it motivational? How did that come
Yeah,
about
I
and how did
mean,
it make you feel?
well, the thing is that fourth album had sort of slipped from our hands, and somebody had the album who didn't really have the rights to the album. So we went to them and we got the rights back, and then upon doing that, we thought, well, let's make it a nice package. So the original sort of 90 Nights Dream, the reissue was like a double album because it had four tracks at the end that Alan Moulder produced that were sort of B-sides around the time, that kind of influenced that album. But the thing is, we had all the reels of tape, so that was the project. Like 2 years ago, I was looking at this, in the downstairs room from here, a whole room full of all these reels of tape, and loads of them were unmarked.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
always mark your tape, so it meant because we have to get them, baked and digitized.
It's like grandma's photo album with no names or dates.
Exactly, yeah. But something good came from it. Something very good.
Yeah.
In fact, what came from it was Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do, because we were searching. It's actually for another session. There's another bunch of tapes around which are of the second album, Mescal Head. They're the demos
Mm.
for the Mescal Head. So we were planning to kind of do a reissue or an issue of that, the kind of demos for Mescal Head, but we couldn't find like the demo for Duel, and I know it's there somewhere, but Duel was missing, along with a couple of other crucial tracks. So it was like a needle in a haystack. So we're searching for Duel, and then I come across these 6 or 7 recordings. I think, what's this? This isn't Duel, and it wasn't even sort of full 24 track recordings with it. It was just 8 tracks, like 7 tracks with instruments and then 1 empty track. Anyway, I kind of bounced it down, figured out what it was, and it was actually demos for 99th Dream, which we'd kind of forgotten existed, really. So that meant that for the 99th Dream reissue, there was the third CD was of all these kind of demo recordings, which were just really the band in the raw. And then and then people liked it so much they were like, can we get this on vinyl as well? So that became Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So was it always a plan to put it on Bandcamp, or was that just kind of like, well, why don't we just do it? Was that serendipity or spontaneity or?
I mean, Bandcamp sort of became the place where we could sell our music, and it seemed like an honest thing. I mean, I know that it's changed hands a little bit, the ownership of Bandcamp, but I suppose for a while people are sort of saying it's like Bandcamp versus Spotify, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, there are things that are just exclusively on Bandcamp,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
and we found Bandcamp's kind of served us quite well. I mean, these new releases are now available, vinyl, and they're on Spotify as well,
Yeah.
But it's nice having the Bandcamp thing because it's like I say, it's nice getting a little update and seeing that somebody's bought
It's a
Lays It
thumbs
Up.
up, right? I
Yeah,
like that. That's awesome. Now, I saw an interview this morning. I was going back through YouTube, and it was an interview, and it looked like in 2020 with Rick Beato, and
oh
in it,
yeah.
you had said something like, "Oh, you were a Zoom virgin." So I'm assuming that you've come quite some time since COVID.
Well, no, I
But
mean, I still haven't done that many Zoom interviews, I have to say.
well, I'm
But
glad. I'm glad to have you here. Now, now you're working with Rick Beato, and I remember or I saw in that interview, you said your neighbor Sandy had suggested it.
yeah,
He saw him on this channel, and I'm just wondering, Sandy got any more
yeah.
recommendations for your collaborations?
Sandy was in bands in the late '60s, and I was recording some stuff a while back, and I needed a bass. I didn't have a bass. I thought, oh, Sandy plays bass. Went across the road. He's got a beautiful Fender from the late '60s, but he's left-handed. I'd forgotten that, so he said you can borrow it, but don't forget it's left-handed. So
Well, Jimi
I ended up
Hendrix is the
going
other
back.
way.
Well, in the end, I did actually kind of work it out upside down, whatever it was that I was doing, and it kind of made sense. But yeah, Sandy's like somebody who just likes Rick Beato, and he started talking to me about him, and I said, well, actually, because Rick had done an episode where he said, this is all about my favorite band that you've never heard of. It's a band from England, Oxford, England,
Yeah.
called Swervedriver. He did a little thing, and then we had a little Zoom chat,
Hmm.
and we just got on, and then he said, look, hey, if you want to come and record at my studio, by all means come and do it. And we kind of thought, well, actually, that's quite a nice offer. It looks like a nice studio.
Yeah.
And when the time came around, we thought, let's go over and do this. So we flew over there, and Rick's engineer was delighted because he said, you're literally the first band that's been in here since like 2016 when Rick's channel started taking off. Because
Oh,
before
wow.
then, it was actually a recording studio.
A
Bands
real
would come in.
studio, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So that was great. So I mean, it was just great having and he did another interview there in his studio, and we went out and had cocktails and ate some food and just had a good time, and we got the work done. So that was really good. So I mean, that kind of completed the EP because we had these 2 songs already kind of in the can, as it were, recorded. which needed work on them. And then we went to Rick's and recorded the two other songs. And then there was an EP sort of ready to be mixed in Brixton. And that's what happened.
Well, you know what? That leads me to a couple of questions here. How did it feel going back to Oxford and working with Ride's Mark Gardner, and then creating this new EP, the new music? Was that kind of like getting back on a bike? Did you need the rest? Were you getting stir crazy? Talk to me about those.
Probably a little bit of all of the above, perhaps. I mean, certainly stir crazy in the sense that it was high time we put something new out because it had been a
Hmm.
long time. And there was that whole period that you were just alluding to in the early part of 2020 and going on for a few more years after that, which kind of put
Hmm.
everything out of sync a bit. But the thing with Mark was, yeah, I mean, we worked with him on the album we did 10 years ago. I wasn't born to lose you. With that album, I did the vocals with him because we were both in Oxford. He's also a singer, and so we work well together. And so with these new songs, I was kind of thinking, well, where should we go to kind of like just do some more recording? And it was obviously going to be Mark's place, partly because it was like a sort of a post-pandemic get-together because a lot of us hadn't seen each other since
Yeah.
for a couple of years, whatever. So those tracks were originally reapproached in like 2022, I think. So they've even taken a fair amount of time to. That's
Hmm.
the World's Fair and Volume Control. But we went around Mark's, and again, it was quite a relaxed thing. We got there, we recorded guitars and percussion and piano and stuff, and then we ate some nice food and just got up or whatever. But it kind of set it up nicely because and then we had these two recordings that were recorded in different places because Volume Control and the World's Fair were originally recorded in LA, and then they were taken back to Oxford and added to there, and then mixed, like I say, in London. Whereas the other tracks were recorded out in Atlanta, Georgia, and then
Hmm.
similarly came back and mixed in London.
It's a
So it
worldwide
was
album.
well, yeah, and then we got the strings in, because a couple of the songs it was just like it just came to mind really. So we got Clina de la Mer and Sarah Wilson, who I'd worked with previously with the band Sophia on tour around Europe, and I just asked those guys if they'd be up for coming down and doing something else for those songs. So it was good because it was like a creative thing as well. It wasn't just sort of like doing it half-assed. It's like let's
Like a
really make.
transit. You know what? That leads me into this question because I really like your approach when you say that the the music is about the feeling it manifests in people. And I've always believed that. And I think, people get caught up on labels and genres. And I've seen all the shoegaze, things from on and on.
Yeah,
But when you work with these different people, like you just mentioned, I mean, you smile when you talk about Rick, you smile when you talk about Mark and all your mates back there getting back together. That seems like it's an important thing with you to create that feeling for the end user, as
yeah,
opposed to just here's your music, like it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a connection with all these people, and also Alan Moulder, who produced all of our albums in the '90s. I mean, we were doing stuff in his studio for the World's Fair EP because he's got a studio space, and got some of the guys there used to work with him. And Alan's been in Antigua in the West Indies for the
My
last year.
favorite Caribbean island.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, I've never been there. I'd love to go there because I do. My family does somewhat derive from Antigua, so one of these days I have to get out there. But even he was kind of consulting, so there's a little back and forth with Alan in the West Indies as well. It was rather nice in the Caribbean, and yeah, I mean, I guess we just got to know. We had a feeling as to where it was going, and it was just a question of carry it through, really.
Hmm.
And I couldn't be happy really with the way that all came together. And then that kind of led on to like people sort of saying, we need to do any shows. It's like, I don't know, we'll see. We haven't done any shows for a long time. Then we got these offers to do these shows in the States, this Slideway Fest, and
Uh-huh.
that just coincided beautifully with it. So yeah, it's all been really good.
Well, that's what you know what? That's on my list. How was the show? How was it getting back? You know, Kings Raleigh, the Palladium out here. I was really trying to get to that show, but I just had some other stuff. How
Right.
do you choose venues that for the live energy, kind of for the live show that's gonna enhance you and the sound and the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to play the right kind of places, you know. And there was a reason we started in Raleigh, and it was good in the end because there was a big. We arrived, I think, a couple of days before the show, and there was a big housewarming going on at somebody's house, which doubled as a kind of welcome Swervedriver thing. So that first show in 6 years, there was lots of kind of friends and family there,
Cool.
because we knew we had this New York and Philly shows, and it was like a question of how we're going to work our way there. And we thought we'd go south, Raleigh, DC, Boston. I mean, the gig in Hamden, it's a great little venue, but we are a little bit too loud for that room. It's a small room, and I kind of wish it could be. But I mean, and then we got to play the two larger shows on there, which is the Brooklyn Paramount, which um, do you know about this venue, which hadn't been open since the early
I
'60s on the
haven't.
it sort of closed down in like 1964 or something. And backstage there are plaques of who played there, and it's like Nat King Cole, Ella
Jeez.
Fitzgerald, Buddy Holly, all this kind of stuff. And the
Wow.
room is beautiful inside, but it was only reopened last year as a music venue. And I think in the years in between, it's occasionally been a sort of gymnasium, basketball gymnasium or something.
Wow.
But that was a really good show, and I guess it was the first time really we've played in front of that kind of crowds for a long time because the two tours we did a long time ago, where we played to most people, were probably the tours where we opened for Soundgarden in
Hmm.
1982, I think, and then Smashing Pumpkins in 1994. And we found out actually, you mentioned the Hollywood Palladium. We realised that the last time we played there was in fact something like 33 years ago to the day of the other Saturday.
That's
Just
amazing.
yeah. So that did make us feel old. But the great thing was the audiences were young. There's lots of kids there. I mean, it's 4,000 people, so a lot of them would have seen us for the first time.
Yeah.
I think what Nicky from the band Nothing and has put together is really good. He's just sort of updating. He's kind of he's pulling together the strands of shoegaze. So they're sort of, I guess they're from around the mid 2010s or whatever. Whatever we call these decades these days.
The aughts or yeah, who knows what?
Yeah, yeah, the aughts or the noughties or whatever. And I guess there are bands, the more current bands, and then they've got some of the OG shoegazers there as well. So us and the likes of the Swirlies or whatever. And but no, it was really good. It was just a really good event, and they did it all, the right kind of way.
Yeah.
They worked, made sure that everything ran smoothly, and great
Cool.
light shows, and just very good. And I gather they put some money back into sort of charities and stuff in their local communities and stuff. So I mean, all around, just like
It's a
a
win
really
for
good.
everyone. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah, I
really
think so.
cool.
Yeah,
Do you like the title OG?
I do quite like that actually because it's
I
so
mean,
ridiculous.
it's kind of
You
cool. It's kind of street
Yeah,
creddy. It's kind of
yeah,
badass.
yeah. It's like because OG original gangster, but
Uh-huh.
it's like OG shoegazers. Sure, I mean the funny thing about that whole terminology is that it was originally a diss, of course.
Hmm.
It was about a band gazing at their shoes because they had no stage presence or whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a classic turnaround, a bit like sort of krautrock or whatever, where it's been turned around and now become a positive sort of thing. So now all the OG shoegazers who 35 years ago were saying we're not shoegaze, now we're saying sure, we'll be shoegaze. Yeah.
Yeah, if that helps you figure out who we are and it gets you to us. I mean,
But it's
it's kind
true.
of funny
Although,
how labels shift, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I think now though, I mean, I think now if you look into bands who claim to be shoegaze, you listen to it and think, well, that's not really what. I mean, whatever you think it is, I suppose. I think that the first time that I really noticed shoegaze as a thing was actually in the days of MySpace. You remember MySpace?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you had like a band page, you could choose your genre, jazz, folk, blues, and then
Hmm.
one day shoegaze appeared. It's like, oh, well, that's interesting that shoegaze was actually a genre on MySpace.
That's a
And maybe shoegaze is going to become the new metal. Perhaps it'll
yeah,
never
yeah.
keep mutating hideously.
That's so funny. I also like how you you embrace the live shows and riffing on songs. I mean, I grew up kind of with the Rush, with the band Rush, and it was if it wasn't perfectly like the album in a live show, then they weren't happy. You seem to be of the other mindset where let's give these people something new and something fresh.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that. I think we always look at the recording as quite different from playing live. Anyway, I mean, some of our recordings will have like sort of four major guitar parts before you've even got to the chorus or whatever, you know. We figured out the way to deal with that is you just cosh people over their head, really, you know, because you play the first riff, the second one comes in, and then the third one comes in so loud that you've forgotten the first one, or it's playing in your head anyway, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
cool. Well, how has how has the your love of comics, that kind of vivid imagery, that kind of stuff, how does the visuals affect your music? I mean, do you see songs in a visual sense? Do you feel that like or the video for World's Fair, it doesn't it doesn't show the listener what to think the song is about. It lets the listener find their own kind of meaning.
yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, that's a good little video. I mean, that was actually very spontaneous. You know, that was
Yeah.
me and my girlfriend walking around in Oxford town centre, and we saw these coloured plastic, what do you call it? Kind of lengths of colour, like
Hmm.
perspex. You could see through them. So we just kind of filmed it on an iPhone, really, and then just edited it, and it seemed to match the music because the music on that song is quite sort of labyrinthine or something. It kind of goes
Yes.
around like weird clockwork in different sort of swirls around. I mean, yeah, we definitely wanted people to just get lost in the music. I don't think we've published the lyrics yet, actually, but I was kind of thinking maybe we should do that. I guess you can do that now on Spotify, can't you? Just insert the
Yeah,
lyrics.
they pull up the lyrics. But I just liked how your head was just kind of like disembodied, floating and coming in and coming out. I think that lent a lot to the total experience of the song because I had listened to the album to your music in the car. I listened on headphones. I listened on the bike, and then when you watch it,
It took you
it
somewhere else.
yeah, yeah, it's really kind of cool. So is comics, do you see
Yeah.
music like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the comics. I mean, that was definitely a big influence around the time when we first kind of were writing songs. At first, when we got signed to Creation Records, and then we got signed to A&M Records, and then we're trying to frantically write songs. And Love and Rockets, the comic Love and Rockets, was a
Mhm.
big influence on a lot of the lyrics and just life in general at the time. Um, I was a bit annoyed when the band Love and Rockets came along because they stole the name, you know.
Mhm.
There's Love and Rockets and Lloyd Llewellyn was another comic by Dan Clowes, and it and so when we've gone back to sort of writing new songs of late, there's definitely a sense of tapping into kind of what we were into back then, even more in a way. But there are influences that have arrived since that weren't there. So I guess you could say it's a melting pot of stuff. I mean, certainly, I would say that yeah, I would say that it's always been quite visual the music. I mean, I think the lyrics have always been quite sort of descriptive, maybe, and then perhaps some of the sounds and the guitars are evocative. You'd like to think, and that take people away somewhere.
Yeah, I
So,
like that. I mean, just going back to your the Sci Flyer
mm,
way back. I mean, just
yeah,
reading the lyrics on that, you're like, holy crap, this is a dystopian apocalypse, man. Where is this guy coming from? But the
yeah,
music was so ethereal and kind of okay, it's not.
yeah. There's all references to like Bucket Rider. That was a little short story that I'd read at the time, and it's all about kind of aliens, but it's also kind of comedic, really. I mean,
Yeah.
the last line of that song is because the aliens have come down to Earth and they're interested in the climate, and then he says, "And our women too."
I
And then
saw that.
and then the aliens sort of say, "Is this who you love?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "But she's only got two arms and one smile." And I say, "That's enough for me by a mile." But I mean, I imagine the alien I was thinking of was maybe there's some of the ones on The Simpsons where they got six
Yes,
eyes,
yes.
eight googly arms or whatever. But it's really saying, I don't know, I mean, if you, I don't know what it's saying really. It's saying
Well,
something.
I mean, it's kind of beauty in the eye of the beholder, really, is what it is. It's like the alien thinks she's ugly and you think she's lovely. I mean,
It's like, yeah, you're from a different planet, so you've got a different perspective on it. But
on
I also kind of
beauty.
felt I kind of felt that if you're going to write lyrics, you could actually have some fun with it. And I think some of the Swervedriver songs do have ridiculous little narratives. There's a song, "The Watchmaker's Hands," which is actually written about a real shop in London, down the hill from Muswell Hill. I used to go past on the bus, and I was convinced that on occasion I'd look over and it wasn't there. So I got this whole idea that somehow the shop was traveling through space and time and going off somewhere. But a friend of mine, our original drummer, actually, he still lives there. And I said, "Is it still there?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, it's still." He said he actually went in recently. I really should go in and give the guy in that shop a copy of that song and say this song
That'd
was,
be hilarious. He'd be
yeah,
like, "What is this?"
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Let me pull through my notes. When you work, you have solo projects, collaborations. You got the main hustle with Swervedriver. You probably got a million other projects. Do you do you compartmentalize all those, or do they just naturally bleed over and you learn something or hear something in this compartment and it kind of bleeds into the other one?
Yeah, I think so. They inevitably do bleed over. I mean, I think some of the songs on the Adam Franklin or Bolts and Melody albums, yeah, a couple of them could be Swervedriver songs, probably. There's also Magnetic Morning, the band that we did around about 2007 to 2010. Magnetic Morning
Mhm.
with Sam Fogarino from Interpol, and that was quite a different thing because we were half, we both wrote half the songs or whatever. But we're actually going to reissue that record this year and maybe do some more stuff there. And I think I'd like to reapproach a couple of those songs in a different style. I mean, we're quite often doing reworkings of the same songs. There are a few versions, I guess, of things like Sci-Flyer. I think when I first did the Adam Franklin album, Swervedriver didn't exist, and then Swervedriver got back together again. So maybe there hasn't been an Adam Franklin album, but there's been the Bolts Melody album, which is
Hmm.
a more electronic-y kind of keyboardy thing. I think you just kind of end up, just seeing where it takes you, really. And but there is a certain amount of thought, like, what makes this right for this project, to a degree.
Did you, as a kid, did you see yourself here? Did you see yourself, you see like a guy in the NFL and he says, "Oh, or on the soccer pitch, oh, I've been seeing myself kicking this goal, since I was 6 years old." Uh,
Right.
Did 6 year old Adam Franklin go, "You know what? 2025, I'll be top of the
Well,
shoegaze pile."
yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think back then, apart from anything, well, if I was 5 years old, I wouldn't have thought that far ahead. But I mean, the one thing about being five, which is consistent with today, I suppose, is vinyl records. I mean, if I thought that I'd be making, producing records, I mean, that was always like, we used to be obsessed with those little seven
Hmm.
inches and looking at them and playing the B side and drawing on the labels. So
Hmm.
it was a bit of a shame, actually, when we first started doing records around about 1990s that CDs had come in. So things weren't always pressed on vinyl. Well, although I think almost all of the Swervedriver back catalogue is available on vinyl. But there's something special. I remember having a Carpenters single. We had "Goodbye to Love" by the Carpenters, which was on that lovely A&M label, and then
Uh-huh.
1990 we signed to A&M, so we wanted to have that original label.
Oh my
But
God.
back then it kind of and it was more arty. It tied in with the artwork, which made sense, in fact. But I mean, it's never ceased to be a thrill to have a new record. Have the new record arrives, the test pressing, you put it on, it's like sounding good. So yeah, I mean,
You kind
I mean,
of you saw yourself on a record maybe someday or somehow in the business. That's
I guess so. I remember my best friend back then, Mark, who's also made lots of records since then, but he went to the beach, the seaside down in I think Southend upon Sea over here in Essex, and on the pier was a kind of like a record. You could go in and put like 10p in and record, and it produced a vinyl record. And him and his sister had one each. She was too young. She was 3 or something. So she's just going, nah, 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 or whatever. But with his one, he actually took a guitar in and he recorded something and he's still got this. I think it's one-sided
Oh
and it's
my
like, not
gosh.
even a 7 inch, it's maybe 8 or 9 inch or something. But I mean, I was so envious of that, looking at that and
Oh
thinking, yeah, well,
yeah.
I want to make a record as well, So,
That's
yeah.
hilarious. I just
Hmm.
thought of a weird question. Where would you say that your musical, where like are you Beatles? Are you Rolling Stone? Are you Who? Where would you
Hmm.
fall in that spectrum?
Well, I think when we were,
Or the
in,
Clash? I'm not sure.
well, that's a clash.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think in the 80s, everybody that I knew, a lot of us, you just sort of like get immersed in a band, if, a month or two, and then you move on and investigate the next band,
Okay.
exhaustively.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, Beatles, Stones, The Who, The
Led
Clash. I mean,
Zeppelin, all of it.
yeah, I mean, but we also were into like the Pebbles albums, all those again those records that were Lenny Kaye did the first, I think Nuggets was his thing, and then they did Pebbles, and there is a compilation of US garage punk and psych bands, a lot of whom only put out one record ever. So you'd hear this, and you'd always wonder, I wonder what happened to this band, because some of that music is totally amazing. And back then, it seemed like such a long time in the past, but you think about it now, we were getting into that 20 years after it had been made, in 86 or 87.
Yeah, yeah.
And 20 years ago now is like we were saying, we don't even know what it's called, the noughties or whatever. But it seems like
Yeah.
time stretched out. And back then, if you look at kind of posters of, festivals going on in, say, England in 1980, and maybe you had Joy Division playing in Killing Joke and all this kind of stuff, but there's no way you'd have had bands from the 1940s on the bill. But that's kind of what's happening now in 2025. And I know that there's a few younger bands that it annoys them because there are all these sort of heritage bands clogging up the bill. But I mean,
Yeah.
bands are just a lot older now, aren't they? I mean, the Rolling Stones are still the oldest, but we're
Uh,
all getting up there now. Jesus.
well, it's funny when The Who announced their final farewell tour. I went back to 1982 at the LA Coliseum on their first final farewell
Right.
tour.
I have to say, I really think the Who should give it in, though. Really, should I say that? Don't print that. But
I'm not
anyway, that's
printing that one. That one's a strike. Well, this has been a great interview. Do you got any questions? You want to add anything on? The future looks pretty bright, I think. Well, I have one
yeah,
more.
yeah.
And you're just talking about young people, and I just remembered this one. And I'm not a techie guy. I mean, I can barely play the radio, so I don't know really a lot about guitars or tuning or chords. But I was
Right.
very interested when you had that interview with Rick Beato. You made tech accessible. I mean I enjoyed that. Usually it kind of is a turnoff when you hear guitar dudes talking, but and then it this question like this, and I don't know what this means, but a lot of young guys, young musicians are saying your guitar tunings, and you guys talked a lot about alt tuning and different tunes. The FCD GCD from Mescal Head is inspiration. I mean, I don't know what that means, but do you see that where your your technical whatever is really inspiring to some new people that are probably wondering how you did it without pro
Yeah.
stuff and all this kind of
Yeah, no, I mean,
tech?
I think it's good to make it accessible. I mean, I'm very flattered by the way that you say you found it interesting, even though you maybe didn't quite know what I was yabbering on about.
You guys were going into it, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a tough
Yeah.
stretch. But
He did another interview with Billy Strings, which is a really good interview. And but I mean, I find actually that there are guys on YouTube and stuff who do these little channels. There's a guy who does a channel called Anyone Can Play Guitar, right? So he did this thing, and he'll 1 minute he'll go one episode he'll say, right, I'm going to show you what Steve Cropper's playing on Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs. And then the next one will be is doing John McGeoch's guitar from Spellbound by Susie and the Banshees. And I watched those because I'm like, actually, how do you play that? And it's like, oh, that's how you do it. So it's good to sort of, I suppose, demystify some of these things. But one thing that did happen in all that time between us putting out a record and this year actually releasing a record again is there were just a couple of these lists that I was on, and like one of them was like actually a list of the top 20 Fender guitar players of all time, and I was on that list, above Steve Cropper, which was kind of embarrassing for me, but
Oh,
it seemed like there was kind of an interest swelling up. We noticed that the social media kind of followers kind of doubled in that time, and
yeah.
I don't know, there's just something swelling up, something going on. And then one of the shows we played recently in Boston, Mark Cates showed up. You mentioned industry interest. I mean, he's the guy that signed Nirvana to Geffen back in the day. And he came backstage and he just said, "Man, that just now, that was ridiculous." Meaning, that was ridiculously good. And and he said to me at the end, he said, "It's really good what you're doing. Keep doing, yeah, it's really important what you're doing. Keep doing it." And it's nice to hear that from, the guy that signed Nirvana back
Yeah.
in 1990 or whatever.
Well,
So I
I
think things do look good, yeah.
yeah, that is definitely high praise and I think well earned. I mean, all of the interviews I've seen, you have a great attitude, you have a great sense of humor. I think that comes across in your music. You don't take yourself seriously. I mean, it really comes across. You come across as a humble guy who really is good at his craft, which I think is endearing to people and it's kind of attractive to new fans. I think I'm 60 years old, so I remember the eras that you're only a few years younger than me that we grew up in.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that this era is the younger people that were, say, our age in the 80s, they're longing kind of for what we had, kind of that
Well,
exploration and to see the
yeah.
past.
I mean, it must be crazy now because it's like you've got access to the whole history of rock, and back
Hmm.
then there was less of the history, but also it's kind of harder to get it, I suppose, because now, well, you didn't have Spotify. You couldn't just dial something up.
We had to go to the record store.
Yeah, and what was I reading about? It was something like, I don't know, it was like, bands in the 80s doing something, and they go, "Oh no, we can't do that. It sounds too much like the other band." Whereas now bands will very happily reference, they'll deliberately sound a bit like somebody as a kind of homage or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I don't know, really. I mean, I think in some ways it's certainly very different for kids now as to how they consume music and the amount they have, and a lot of them probably have, I don't know, their parents kind of Spotify playlists and they probably just play them. And like you say, do have exposure to, the stuff that was happening back in our kind of era, if we'll call it that, like a bunch of
Yeah.
couple of old farts or whatever. But I mean, and also there literally were fewer bands. I mean, now everybody's a recording, and now, everybody's a recording artist. Everybody can put their record on Bandcamp. Everybody claims to be a mastering engineer and everything. You know what I mean? It's kind of like,
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, like you mentioned the craft. It's like, I guess, try and be good at one of those crafts at least.
Yeah, and I think that comes across. I mean, I've always felt this way about music that, I was raised in a peer group of, hard rock, Black
Right.
Sabbath and Zeppelin and, all that kind of stuff, Bad Company. But, and it was always disco sucks or don't listen to Madonna or new
Yeah,
wave
yeah,
is horrible. And I was always kind of like, yeah, but Madonna was the best at what she did at that
yeah.
genre at the time. So why not enjoy the best of a genre? And I think that
Yeah.
today we do that.
Yeah, I think now people will embrace. They'll do a song, and it'll be a little bit Black Sabbath and a little bit ABBA or whatever, and
Hmm.
nobody, bats an eye, kind of thing, and that's
Yeah,
great. It's all just, it's all just,
it's
it's all
music
just,
and it's how it makes you feel, right? To your
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Well, listen, I've really had enjoyed our time. We're almost at the end. Do you got anything to add? You want
No, I'm just thinking about Sabbath. We did go down recently. Black Sabbath's first album. Uh, the album cover was taken not far from here.
to? Hmm.
There's an old mill in Oxfordshire, and we drove over there to try and get some pictures. And then all these kind of hooray Henrys, we call them, kind of posh folks who hunt foxes and stuff like that. And the guy comes over and says, "You can't be here. You can't get off our land," and all this stuff. But it's funny because I reckon they get lots of Black Sabbath sort of fans showing up there every day, every day of the week, probably
It's like
because
a
people,
mecca, yeah.
yeah, they just go there and like going to get their pictures taken.
Hmm.
Well,
I did a big article on Black Sabbath on Paranoid, and I was surprised to find out that uh, they finished that just 2 months after their first album
Yeah, that's right. It's crazy.
because they thought they had, oh man, we made it, we're
Yeah,
done. And the
yeah.
manager was like, no, you better crank this out.
Yeah, it's like in the late 70s. I mean, the Stranglers and Elvis Costello and the Attractions did like, yeah, 3 or 4 albums in a little 2 years stretch of time and stuff. It's crazy. Nobody took any time off. Actually, one thing I was going to say was about the Clash. You were saying about how you get now a melting pot, Black Sabbath, a bit of disco, whatever. And I think the Clash's Sandinista album, which is an album I love. I mean, it's much maligned because it's a triple album, so there's so much in there. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of dub sort of reworkings. But I love that album, playing that album on shuffle, because I think it's like a radio station, really, because it's all sorts of, you don't know what's coming next. But I think now artists do put out records that are much more, um, what's the word, eclectic, where
Hmm.
we'll have, here's the heavy song and then it goes into some pastoral thing and then something else. I think things are just, yeah, much more mixed up
I
and I think
think
that's in our
that's so
music.
yeah, that's so interesting you say that because I think, because for me, when we got an album, and then even when it went to cassettes, unless you made a mixtape, you listened to it the way they laid it down, unless you wanted to get
Yeah,
up
yeah,
and pop the needle, and that was too much work, especially if you're
yeah,
taking a hit or anything. But now you put shuffle and
yeah,
it's like Jack FM. People they
yeah,
don't want to curate their own music in a sense.
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
have any
yeah.
thoughts on that?
I mean, well, I think Sandinista is like you say, because back then it would have been the cassette or the vinyl, and the vinyl would have been 6 songs, and then you go over and turn it over. The cassette may have been sort of like, I don't know, 12 and a side or something, but now you can actually play it, have it on it in its entirety. It kind of transforms the whole listening experience. And like I say, I do listen to that one on shuffle. I'm not bothered about the order, and there are songs that aren't as good as the others, but even those you sort of like appreciate them in a new way, really. There's a
Yeah.
song on that album called Shed My Skin, I think it's called. And I worked out that only one member of the Clash from the first album was even on that track. It's got Tyrone Dog singing and there's a violin going on, but it's like they're singing about kind of shedding. I don't think it's shed my skin, it's lose this skin. And it's almost like they're trying to lose who they are as the Clash while still being the Clash. So I don't know, that's deep and meaningful, isn't it?
That's
But it all, yeah,
very reinventing, kind of reinventiveness.
like a snake shedding its skin.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of attraction to that in today's age where people are put in boxes, like we
Yeah,
were talking about genres, and people are sick of that in a way. They're like, just let me like what I want and
exactly. Yeah.
listen to
Break
what
free.
I want.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're a joy. I'm a new fan.
Thanks, man. I'm enjoying this chat as well. You're pretty awesome as well. I
Well,
look
thank you.
forward to checking out the. Oh, well, there is a new photo. I don't know if Rick told you, our press guy, but there's a picture taken that we should give you because it was taken just on the recent. It was just at a, a motel, and there was a red light, but it's just a picture of the band. But we'll get that to you for.
Oh, that would be great. I'm sure we'd love
Yeah,
to use that in the piece. Well,
yeah,
this is
cool.
awesome. I'm excited. This is what I call it my hobby hustle. I have a real hustle, but this is a hobby hustle, and I
All
get to
right.
meet and talk to incredible people and get new insights.
Nice.
Uh,
That's good. Yeah.
and try and find out a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of gear guys, there's a lot of structure guys. I'm more interested, and I love your approach, the how the music makes you feel. So if you have
Mm.
anything about how you want to leave your fans feeling or your listeners feeling, what is there a
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, with this EP we just put out, it's like 15 minutes long or something. So it was like curating 15 minutes. Of, somebody's going to sit there, and you are actually, you know, shifting their mood. I mean, it's a responsibility. You've got to put out a good record.
I
Yeah,
like that. Now that's a little bit switched too, because you used to have songs. I was looking through your history. You had 14 and 15-minute songs in the past. So having a whole project 15 minutes long is
that's true. Yeah, yeah. The most expensive song we ever recorded was probably about 11, maybe 15 minutes. Neon lights glow. It cost loads of money just technically because of the amount of tape used. And we had to rent in Pro Tools, which didn't exist at the time. And then that song didn't end up making the album anyway because we'd gone off it. So yeah, it appeared later on. But there you go.
Awesome. Well, we could go on and on. But I really appreciate it. I'm gonna start writing this up, and I'm really looking forward to your next project.
Cheers, Rick. Thank you very much for the chat. It's great.
Take care. Have a great day. Bye
And you.
bye.
Thank